Looking at the Middle East from orbit, the tension in the region centers almost entirely around these narrow waterways. Economically, the stakes are absolute. 1/5 of the world's global crude oil supply passes through these specific corridors to reach international markets. Currently, the diplomatic channels designed to secure this region are completely frozen. Negotiations regarding the United States naval blockade of Iran have stalled. In the absence of diplomacy, Washington has maintained a strategy of severe economic and military pressure, enforcing a strict maritime blockade to isolate Tehran. Former President Donald Trump has explicitly defended this approach, stating that blockades are ultimately more effective than bombing campaigns. In response to this tightening grip, Iran has escalated its rhetoric, repeatedly threatening to deploy a new, highly classified mystery weapon against American forces. Iran's Navy commander, Shahram Irani, recently amplified this threat with a sensational claim, stating that the weapon is already in position and will give U.S. forces a heart attack. The actual asset behind this political theater is the Hoot, or whale torpedo, an underwater projectile heavily derived from late Soviet engineering. To understand the actual danger this weapon poses, we have to look past the media hyperbole and analyze the strict physics of how it operates. The primary target of Tehran's warnings is the multi-billion-dollar U.S. carrier strike group currently operating in the region. Under standard rules of naval warfare, an American carrier operates with near invulnerability, protected by advanced radar networks and highly coordinated layered defenses. Because of this technological gap, military observers initially dismissed the Iranian heart attack weapon as domestic propaganda designed for a local audience. But the skepticism faded when it became clear the Hoot is based on the Russian VA-111 Shkval, a highly proven late 1990s torpedo design. Iran first clandestinely tested their version in 2006, and after nearly 2 decades of refinement, they are now signaling its imminent deployment. This introduces the tactical reality of littoral warfare, coastal combat that follows an entirely different set of rules than deep ocean engagements. To accurately measure the threat to an American carrier, we have to examine the extreme fluid dynamics that govern how this specific weapon travels underwater. The fundamental constraint of all naval warfare is density. Ocean water is roughly 1,000 times denser than air. Every conventional torpedo ever built is forced to fight this immense hydrodynamic drag to reach its target. As the projectile pushes through the ocean, the water applies massive friction, actively slowing the weapon down every meter it travels. Because of this resistance, even the most advanced conventional torpedoes max out at speeds between 60 and 100 kilometers per hour. The engineering breakthrough of the Hoot is that it doesn't fight the water, it bypasses it entirely. This cross-section image shows the internal architecture of a supercavitating weapon. Instead of a standard propeller system, it relies on a rocket engine. When the solid fuel rocket motor engages underwater, it creates a massive amount of pressurized exhaust. That exhaust gas is forced forward and expelled out of a specially designed nose cone at the front of the torpedo. This expelled gas forms what is called a cavitation bubble, a complete envelope of air that surrounds the entire projectile. This diagram shows the difference. The top torpedo fights constant fluid resistance. The bottom Hoot flies inside a gas pocket. Friction drops to near zero, turning the ocean into a high-speed runway, allowing it to reach velocities of 360 kilometers per hour. Supercavitation brilliantly solves the problem of underwater speed, but that extreme velocity requires severe design compromises. The first major trade-off is fuel consumption. Pushing a heavy projectile to 360 kilometers per hour requires a massive, rapid burn of solid rocket fuel. Because it burns through its propellant so quickly, the Hoot's absolute maximum range is restricted to a mere 15 kilometers. The second major trade-off is sensory blindness, caused directly by the weapon's own extreme environment. The deafening roar of the rocket motor, combined with the turbulence of the gas bubble, completely deafens the torpedo's onboard sonar systems. It is not a smart guided missile. The Hoot is a dumb, fire-and-forget kinetic projectile with almost no ability to autonomously track a moving target. Now, consider the defensive reality of a modern U.S. carrier strike group operating in the open ocean. The carrier is surrounded by layered screens of destroyers, cruisers, and air patrols, designed to detect threats from hundreds of miles away. For an Iranian submarine to initiate a strike, it has to penetrate these outer perimeters. Look at the Hoot's tiny 15-kilometer firing range compared to the massive scale of the American defenses. The attacking vessel has to survive a slow, highly detectable approach through hundreds of miles of hostile water to pull the trigger. In open water, deploying the Hoot against a U.S. carrier is essentially a suicide mission, guaranteed to fail before the weapon is even launched. However, military weapons are rarely built in a vacuum. They are designed to exploit specific environments. This satellite map shows the exact geography where Iranian naval forces operate, the entrance to the Persian Gulf. The absolute narrowest gap in the Strait of Hormuz measures only about 33 kilometers across. When you factor in the depth required for heavy vessels, the actual navigable shipping lanes restrict the viable battle area to a strip roughly 50 kilometers wide. The Iranian coastline runs directly adjacent to these highly concentrated commercial shipping lanes. When we apply the Hoot's 15-kilometer range limitation to this map, those overlapping firing arcs blanket the entire navigable corridor. Inside this tight space, the weapon's extreme velocity means heavy commercial tankers and warships have zero reaction time to deploy countermeasures. The claustrophobic geography of the strait covers the Hoot's design flaws, making a blind, short-range projectile a lethal threat within the corridor. Tehran's ultimate strategic objective is not to win a pitched, deep-water naval battle against the United States Navy. Their military doctrine relies on anti-access area denial, creating an environment so hazardous that the enemy simply refuses to enter. To achieve this, Iran dedicates a massive amount of personnel and highly specialized asymmetric assets specifically to secure this coastline. The supercavitating Hoot torpedo is just one layer of this defensive web, operating alongside swarms of agile speedboats and thousands of underwater sea mines. This chaotic area denial strategy stands in direct contrast to the immense, highly concentrated conventional power that U.S. forces deploy to maintain order. By saturating a narrow choke point with fast, lethal, short-range weapons, Iran creates an unacceptable risk profile for any incoming vessel. The global economy, represented by massive commercial fleets, is the primary hostage in this standoff. If international shipping companies deem the strait too dangerous and refuse to risk their vessels, 20% of the global oil supply stops moving immediately. The current standoff proves how regional geography allows flawed technology to dictate the terms of global maritime security.